What is today's date?
Today's date is December the 27th,
Of what year?
2022.
Okay. And could you state your names for the cameras, please?
Wayne Oneal.
Berneice Oneal.
All right. And what do we, as family, call you?
Mamé and Papa.
Okay. And do you know what we're doing today?
Filming something.
No, I don't.
No.
Okay, so today we are asking you guys questions from a childhood to your marriage to stuff about your kids, like memories you have. So there are specific questions, and we're just gonna go based off of what I have, and I'll probably build on them a little bit. So just be prepared for that. And are you nervous today? Are you excited? How are you feeling?
Relax.
I am too.
All right. So, which one of you would like to go first?
Ladies are always first.
All right.
I'll
So,
do it.
Papa, if you could please step into the other room with me for a little bit. So, our first question: what do you remember most about your mom?
She was in charge. Everything was well disciplined. She never spanked us, but we got the message. And she loved us, but she never told us. But
What do
we
you remember?
realized we did. We realized she loved us, but she never told us.
What do you remember most about your mom?
My mom, she was a good cook. She worked hard. She wasn't very big, but very faithful.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember most about your dad?
He was more strict. He was Irish, and he had temper. And we were with 5 girls. If we were out in the kitchen doing dishes and we had made too much noise and we were doing dancing around, say, he'd come out because it would wake him up from a nap, and he'd take us by the ear and pull us over to the sink and make us get back to do your dishes.
Oh.
So he was very strict. There was one way to do it, and that was his way.
What do you remember most about your dad?
Very firm. Had a temper. Was easy to get along with, but don't make him mad. What I remember most about, you could usually tell whether he was kidding or very serious. He'd have little cracks on his eyes here if he was joking with you. But if you didn't see those little lines there, you paid attention and listened very carefully.
But what do you remember most about your siblings?
Well, there were 5 girls and 2 boys. My oldest brother just died when he was 88. Then I have an older sister that really took care of us most of the time, helped most. And then I had 3 more sisters. But my brother one of my older brothers, when he was 21, had a car wreck and was killed in an accident with 4 kids, with 8 kids in the car, and he was driving. And he lived about 2 or 3 days. And my sister was a nurse, and they said, we got an accident, come down here. And she said, that's my brother that's in that accident. So he was injured internally, and so they took care of him last. So today's world, he would have survived, but not then. The girls, we got along pretty well. Still did. Eunice and I were probably the closest.
Closest? Yeah. What do you remember most about your siblings?
Oh, they were spoiled, like all of us. They liked me. They thought I was the spoiled one of the bunch. So,
And how many siblings do you have?
I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
And were you the youngest, oldest,
I was
middle?
the youngest. I was the baby of the family. That's the reason I thought I was spoiled.
What do you remember most about your grandparents?
Not very much. My grandparents, my dad's mother and dad, he was the oldest, which meant they were older. But we didn't see them a whole lot. They lived in Fowler, and when she got really sick, she had thyroid trouble, and she had like an egg growth on her neck, because he wouldn't let her be operated on. And she would just lay there and look at you, barely turn her head. But he took care of her all by himself until she died. And then my mother's family, since she was the youngest, I barely remember them. I just remember going to their house one Christmas Eve. I was on my older brother's shoulders. I don't know which one. And we walked in the door, and there was this big Christmas tree, and everybody, each grandchild had a little cellophane cup candy, piece of candy. And we each got a little candy piece. And we saw them back, way back. We walked through this house, and there was a light, and they were in the kitchen, because that's where the only heat they had. I don't remember much about them at all.
That seems like a lot, right? Yeah. What do you remember about your grandparents?
I did not remember too much of my grandparents at all. My two grandpas, one grandpa I never knew, and the other one died when I was like 8 years old. We didn't travel much then. We didn't see them that often, maybe twice a year. My one grandma, she was a very hard worker and very kind to me.
What do you remember most about growing up at home?
Aunt Eugene and I played a lot, but my mother always took a nap in the afternoon. So the two of us would go out and play in the woods. We had a bunch of trees, because we called it the woods. And we'd go out there and play farm, and we'd play family and all kind of games out there. But we played a lot. Once in a while we'd have a fight, but not very much. But we got along pretty well.
That's good. What do you remember most about growing up at your home?
At my home, I had life easy. I didn't have to work hard. I mowed the yard, took care of that. So if we had a curfew, that we were very much encouraged to be home. We had always had food, had a warm house, and had a good home life, really.
So what would you do for fun as a family?
My mom and dad played cards every weekend, every Sunday night, and so we kids went with them. We played games at home, but not in the house. We played cards only, and if we didn't win, and if you cried, you had to stay at the table and play another game. So you'd learn how to lose. It was hard. We survived though.
What would you do for fun as a family?
Go to a ball game somewhere.
Did you have any special toys as a child, and do you still have them?
I don't have. I did it. One of my godmother sent me a doll from New York, which had, it wasn't made out of glass, the body wasn't, but whatever it was, one of my cousins wanted to go to a Christmas show with us, and she got to carry my doll, and she dropped it and broke the arm off. So upset. I was probably first grade, and she was probably kindergarten. Anyway, that was my favorite first toy that I remember.
And what did the doll look like?
What?
What
Oh,
did
it's
the doll
beautiful.
look like?
Beautiful face and eyes that moved. And my mom would dress it up on Christmas. She'd hide it for a week. And she'd dress it up on Christmas for a new toy. So that's what I did at Christmas.
Did you have any special toys as a child, and do you still have them?
I do not still have. My special toy would have to be probably a bicycle. I always was lucky enough to have a bicycle to ride. I remember I was probably 12 years old, and my mother and dad bought me a brand new bicycle, and it would cost a great sum of $55. It was a nice one. It was a very nice one.
What values did your parents teach you that you taught your children?
Mostly faith, faith. If anything goes wrong, there's not a whole lot you can do about a lot of things. But God has a plan, whatever it is. He told us, especially when my brother got killed in an accident, there was a song out, whatever will be, and my mother sang that song all the time. And I thought, my gosh, she's really up on all the latest songs, but what she was doing was comforting herself. Whatever will be, will be. So I think I feel the same way. If something goes bad, usually something good comes after that.
Mm-hmm.
But our faith was very, very strong. We prayed the rosary a lot. When we got here, we prayed it right here.
What values did your parents teach you that you taught to your children?
Work hard, be honest, be nice to other people. I think respect adults. I got that from my parents, and I think that a lot of my sons and daughters respect and treat elderly people friendly.
What are some of your memories from high school?
Well, your grandpa was 2 years older than me, and he wanted to date me, but I said, "You are too old." He was a senior and I was a sophomore. Don't ever date any older guys. The other thing was, some boy asked me, we couldn't date until we were 16, and a boy asked me about 2 weeks before I was 16 to go to the prom, and my dad said, "She can't go, she's not 16. I really didn't want to go with him, but anyway. I liked school. I went to spend 1 year in a boarding school, all girls, and I made excellent grades, and I came back for my senior year. And I was a better student then, because I knew if I studied, I could get better grades. There was no distractions like boys then.
What are some of your memories of high school?
High school, playing sports. I didn't study hard in school at all. I went to school for one purpose, and that was play sports.
What sports?
Played 3 sports. That's all we had in ball school. We had track and basketball and baseball.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Oh gosh, I don't remember. Home ec probably. PE.
Homework.
Reading. I liked reading.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Oh, probably agriculture.
Why's that?
Took ag because I was interested in farming a little bit and animals. And it was probably agriculture.
Is there a historical event you remember most from your childhood?
Just when my brother died. Got killed in an accident, and then we couldn't talk about him because they were so emotional they would cry. So when their family came, my sister and I would go out and hide underneath the window where there was a screen, and we could hear them talking about it and how they felt about it at the time. But if we come in the house, they'd talk about something else.
Do you not remember the end of World War II or 9/11?
Well, no, my brother sang "I'll Be Home for Christmas" during the war.
Mm-hmm.
And he was sitting up on the stage, and there was a curtain, and then when he was saying "I'll Be Home for Christmas," I opened it. But I knew that there was a war, but then
You don't remember?
I don't remember.
What about 9/11?
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was not that long ago.
What were you doing when that happened?
I was here by myself. I don't know exactly what I was doing. I think I was here. Yeah, I was here. At first, you don't believe it. You think, when you know you have to, and then it's all day that day and the next day, and Dad was at work and they quit working.
Yeah. What historical event do you remember most about from your childhood?
Historical event. I really didn't know that too much about Pearl Harbor at the time, but now that I'm older, I remember it, what the devastating thing it was. And I guess that's it.
Do you remember 9/11?
Oh yes, I was at work, and it came over the radio, and we thought it was a joke at first, and then we just thought it was a fire until we realized the seriousness of it and that it was the enemy.
So here's a fun question.
Okay.
If you could go to college to be anything, what would have it been?
What would have it been? At
Yeah.
that time, they told me I should be a nun. Because of all the questions you ask, can you like this and this and this? And probably a nurse.
Nurse?
Yeah.
You would like to be a nurse?
I think I would have. Then I got to be with kids.
So here's a fun question. If you could go to college to be anything, what would it have been?
It would have been a veterinarian. I had a farmer, I liked livestock. I had a farmer that was willing to pay my college education if I went to college to be a veterinarian. But I didn't feel like I was qualified to be a veterinarian. Because you had, at that time, you had 6 years of school. There was no other question. It was 6 years of school of hard study. I didn't think I would qualify.
How did you first meet Wayne?
In high school. And I said I thought he was too old, but the coach thought we should date. So one day he brought this skirt to me and he said, "Would you hem this skirt? We're gonna do some." At school at noon, once a week, we'd have like a students would get together and then they'd do something. So they were gonna be the Andrews sisters or something. So yeah, I'll do that. And then when the show came on, he had on the skirt that I just hemmed. I was so embarrassed, I probably couldn't even look. That's what I remember.
How did you first meet Berneice?
In high school, she was 2 years behind me in class, and we just, you knew it was a small school, you knew everybody there, knew everybody's name, saw them every day, so she caught my eye.
And then when you first saw Wayne, what did you think?
Really cute. But there were a lot of other girls thought he was cute too.
When you first saw Berneice, what did you think?
When I first saw her,
Yes.
I figured that she probably was well disciplined and probably would never be able to date a boy. And she was very kind, friendly.
So what was one of your favorite memories about dating?
Well, he kept asking. Well, I was working for a doctor in Lafayette, and he'd come visit me or come. We'd go on a date, and he'd ask me. He'd talk about getting married. Well, he was older than me. I wasn't ready to get married. I just got out of high school. So my story is, he asked me so many times. Finally, I just got tired of him asking me. I just said yes.
That was gonna be my next question. Is what do you remember about dating her?
Curfews. You respected her. You treated her very kind, because that's the way she wanted to be treated. And she was very qualified gal to go out with.
What do you remember about the proposal?
I said he asked me so many times, and finally I thought, well, I guess he's going to keep on asking me, and I don't get. It's fine, because I knew I loved him, but I didn't know what kind of love it was.
Do you remember the day,
No.
or do you remember
No
where
occasion.
you were? No occasion. It was just a
We just-
random day.
Probably on a date.
Probably on a date.
Yeah.
What do you remember about your proposal?
I'm not sure we ever had a proposal. It was just one of those things that we were dating and was very serious about each other. And all at once we said, I think we ought to get married. And it was kind of a hurried up thing. We wanted to get married before Lent because you couldn't get married during Lent. So that's the reason her mother always said when she said she was getting married, so what's a hurry? So, but that's, we got married pretty young.
You don't remember where you were when you asked, or
No,
what day?
No, I don't think there was ever anything, would you marry me? We was just like, we found each other and we said, if we're gonna get married, we gotta hurry up and do it before Lent.
And then what do you remember about your wedding day?
It was cold. It rained, and then it snowed, and then all that rain froze. So everything was icy when we got to the church. That little piece where the railroad track is, people couldn't get over that because the cars kept sliding back. It was freezing cold. And then we went to Kentland, which is 30 miles away, for the dinner. And one of my cousins came from Chicago with the wedding cake, which was about this tall. Because his dad owned a bakery, so that was their wedding gift. And we put it in the back seat, and he slid around, and the cake separated. The 3 layers separated. So he was so embarrassed, but he was quick to put it back together. But I just remember it was cold.
What do you remember about the wedding day?
Oh, snowstorm. Had a terrible snowstorm. Excuse me. snowstorm that morning, and we had the reception like 25 miles away, and people had trouble getting there, and it was cold, but it was a great day. So,
You raised a family when you were young, so what was it like having a family at a young age?
Well, I was the youngest, so they said I was spoiled. But
No, your family, not
my family,
like the kids
these
you had.
our kids' family.
Yes.
What I remember. At what age? When they were young.
No, when you were young. You just had a family at a young age, so
Oh,
what do
yeah.
you remember most?
Our first child was born when I was 18, and we had two in that year. Well, I was 19 by then. I was pretty busy, and then a year and a half later, I had another one, and a year and a half later, I had another one. So we were diaper busy for quite a while. But so 8 of our other friends had 8 kids too, so eventually it was okay. Worked out fine. They're okay, all of them.
So you raised a family when you were at a young age. What was it like raising a family?
well, Berneice did most of the work. I worked away from the house, had a steady job, and put long hours in. At one time, I had 3 different jobs trying to make ends meet, and was not making much money, but I didn't want to go to the big city and move my kids in there to a big city. I like the small town.
So next I'm going to ask you about each of the kids. So we're going to go down from the oldest to the youngest. So what do you remember most about Mark?
He had trouble in school, so we had him tested at Purdue, and they said teachers thought he was a slow learner or something, but he just had trouble reading. And but he was good. He could put anything together. If you gave 2 boys to put an airplane together, they'd both sit down at the same time, and he'd put his together, and Matt would sit over here and read the instructions. Mark was done, and Matt hadn't finished the instructions yet. He was going to do it by step, by step, by step. He was and still is good with his hand, putting things together.
So these next questions are about each of your kids.
Oh, mercy.
We're going to do it from oldest to youngest. So what do you remember most about Mark?
Mark would do anything. He was mechanically inclined. He could fix things. He was pretty quiet. He was not a very good student, but he went to school every day. Never had any trouble with him not going to school. Yes, he went to school to get away from mom and dad.
What do you remember most about Matt?
Matt had a temper. He was an excellent student, and he was tall and thin, and Mark was chunky. So Matt wore slim pants, and Mark wore huskies. But they eventually both got taller.
What do you remember most about Matt?
Matt was a little different. He had a temper, but he was if something was going to happen, it was going to happen to Matt. Arm break or something. So, but he was good in school, good student. Most of the kids were very good students.
What do you remember most about Tony?
Well, he was always funny, always funny. He was good in sports. He like to try them all, whether he was good in them or not. But at least he wanted to try them. He was good as a student too.
What do you remember most about Tony?
Tony was the troublemaker. He was the jokester of the family. I think it was because he was born, birthday was on April the 1st, and that was April Fool's, and he lived and died on that thing. He would tell kids the day of his birthday, and they said, "Oh, we're not falling for that." So they never did do anything in school to him because they thought he was joking about having a birthday on April Fool's Day.
What do you remember most about Vince?
My first thing that I remember, but always remember, is he went to grade school and he had to walk across this pasture out here. And he wasn't very big. He was always little when he was little. And I kept thinking, he's too small to go to school. But I had 3 other kids here, so we had to go. But they always said, well, that's your favorite, that's why you remember that. But he never got in trouble. Never, ever, ever. I don't know why. I think because he watched the others get in trouble, and he didn't. He just stepped back.
He knew what to do. He knew what was right and wrong.
Don't do that.
What do you remember most about Vince?
Vince was very serious-minded. He was the serious one. He's since then he's a jokester, but I think going through school he was a good student. Vince was a very good student. I think he was very serious about life.
What do you remember most about Denise?
She was a little mother. She and Chris were like, they took care of a lot of things, but Denise, she wasn't real happy about being the only girl for a long time. But then finally she said, I was kind of proud of it because I was the only girl with all those boys. And then Maria was born, and then she changed it up. She was always going to be a nurse, I think. Wanted to be, and she did. Still is doing that.
What do you remember most about Denise?
Denise for a while was spoiled. She was very mouthy. Her husband can't believe that she was, but I remember slapping her one time. That's what I remember most about Denise, and it changed her whole life. It was like throwing a switch that because she would holler at her mother and sass back, and that stopped.
What do you remember most about Christopher?
He was a good student. He was a good student. And he had a memory, it still does. You know, he could remember the clothes he wore to kindergarten. Okay, so that continued on and on. And then they went off to college, and he went on and on and on there too. I think he was 33 and he was still in college.
What do you remember most about Christopher?
Christopher's kind of he didn't like sports, liked school. He was off by himself a lot.
What do you remember most about TR?
He was funny. He was funny. But by the time he came along, everybody in school knew him. If we'd drive around the square, he'd be waving, and people would be yelling, especially the girls, hey TR, hey TR. So he wasn't noticeable, and then he got a lot of attention. And then he had his little sister 6 years later, but anyway. And the kids would grab him and they'd run around with him at school, so they all knew who he was. And there weren't too many other kids with initials at that time.
What do you remember most about TR?
TR was very inquisitive. He liked math. I was a math student, and he had a paper route, catered to visiting old people to collect money on in his job. He liked going and collecting the weekly paper bill so he could talk to the older ladies.
What do you remember most about Maria?
What do I remember most? Well, she was in a lot of things. She was a cheerleader. She was not the best student. She got good grades, but she probably was spoiled to a certain extent because they gave her what she wanted. And by then we had a little bit more money, so we could. But she always had friends here because she was the last one here. So most weekends we had other girls here, and then once in a while she'd go someplace else. But she'd always have at least 3, very seldom just 1. So she liked being around people, and she still is.
What do you remember most about Maria?
Maria she was a little sly. Found out that after got older that she had parties when we'd be gone, and nobody would know about it till later on in life, like 15, 20 years later. We found out she'd have parties, so she was a little bit sly.
The next question is still tailored to each of the kids, all individually. What are you most proud of Mark for in his life?
That he overcame that problem that they said he had. He couldn't get, his grades were never. Matt was an A student, and he was. If he got a C, we celebrated. But he overcame that and went on to do things with his hands, and still is.
All right, so this next question is still about each of the kids individually. So what are you most proud of Mark for in his life?
The fact that his education, he was not very good at school, but he always had a job, he worked hard, and he got a gift of tearing stuff apart and putting it back together without any education at all. He just, that was Mark's, and he wasn't afraid to get dirty.
What are you most proud of Matt in his life?
He went off to Colorado with a scholarship to play baseball, and he liked it there, but he couldn't come home till Thanksgiving. So the families there, different families, kind of adopted him. And if it was a holiday, they took him to their house. And I think 2 years ago, for his birthday, the family got his college friends together, and they said, "Hey, we're going to Colorado just for the weekend." And they all had a reunion. He was a good student. He was a good guy. And he did drive kind of recklessly, wrecked a couple cars.
What are you most proud of for Matt in his life?
Matt had to get married and took care of it, stayed married. Marriage lasted. He stuck with his wife and had a son that he raised, and always had a job. All of our kids always had a job. They didn't have trouble getting a job.
What are you most proud of for Tony in his life?
That he finally got through college. Barb helped him after we went. But he was, of course, had a swimming scholarship. Didn't have to pay anything when he went to Ball State. But he was funny. He didn't get any trouble that I knew of. I'm sure he probably just did some things we didn't know about. But he had a good, nice personality.
What are you most proud of Tony for in his life?
I think studying hard. He went to college. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, but he ended up being a school teacher, and very glad that he done that. I'm not sure that's what I thought he would grow up to be, but that's what he does, and he's a different teacher.
What are you most proud of Vince in his life?
He was just a solid guy. Just never do it. He was at college for a long time too, and he worked and went to school at the same time. And he married a lovely lady.
What are you most proud of for Vince in his life?
I think he married a gal with 3 children, and I think the fact that he took them in, they was without a dad to speak of, and he took those 3 boys and like they were his, and took care of them and helped them educate and raised them.
What are you most proud of for Denise in her life?
What she's doing now, she's always, all those kids she's taking care of, and on how she did it. The first one did not survive, and that was kind of hard. When they had the funeral, they said we weren't supposed to go, but the rest of them did. But just the way she's handled her life.
What are you most proud of Denise for in her life?
She went to college to be a nurse. She didn't follow that up. She got married and had a big family, and she's a very devoted, great mother, very proud of her religion, and she has a son that's a priest, which that's very proud of that, and she's very sincere about her religion.
What are you most proud of Christopher for in his life?
He's done quite well. He's been in school for a long time, trying different things, but he seems to be pretty happy now.
What are you most proud of for Christopher in his life?
I think he went away to college and he did things. He went to different colleges, and I think the fact that the job he's got now, that he's very sincere about his religion too. He goes to church every Sunday and willing to help people.
What are you most proud of TR in his life?
He's got a lovely daughter. And Cindy was a good choice, although I think Cindy chose him. So she's told us anyway that she hired him. So I think he's doing very well. I like what he's doing. He seems to like what he's doing, or would be doing it. He's helping a lot of people in what he's doing.
What are you most proud of for TR in his life?
I think the education he got, I'm sure I didn't know what he wanted to be, and he was going to be a math teacher at one time, and that went the other way, and then he got a job as hall director in college, and went to 2 or 3 different colleges, and works in the college now, and very sincere about his job.
What are you most proud of for Maria in her life?
I don't know how she does it at being special needs, but you have to have a certain personality, and she's 12 or 13 years she's been doing it now, maybe 20. Yeah, and she still likes it. So
What are you most proud of Maria for in her life?
I think the fact that she had a chance the opportunity to not be a good child, but she stuck with it. She had to get married, and she fulfilled her education, knew what she wanted to do, and she's worked up through the branches and has got a good job. She's been very dedicated with her children, and she's went from the bottom there for a while and clear to the top. She's proud of her for her continuing the education she has.
So these are not about your kids now. We're done with all kid questions. So what are 3 words to describe your spouse?
he's funny. He's very faithful in religion and his life. And he's kind of cute.
Alright, so these are no longer about your kids. These next 2 questions. What are 3 words to describe your spouse?
Myself,
Your spouse.
my spouse, loving, caring, and religion.
What are 3 words or values you choose to live by?
My faith to begin with, and money is not the thing that I don't have to have a lot of money. I like to be happy with what we're happy with what we have. Our health is good, and we're thankful for that.
What are 3 words or values you choose to live by?
To be a Christian, to know that God's in charge, treat people nice. If somebody's in trouble, help them out. Don't be afraid to lend a helping hand to someone.
What are 3 pieces of advice you would give to a newly married couple?
I think the best thing for us was the same faith. Instead of him going to his church and me going to my church, and then the kids not knowing which church you want to go to. So I think what's first, probably even before, I always said all through high school, I'll never marry anybody except Catholic. So when I started dating him, and when he talked about getting married, I said, we can't get married because I'll only marry a Catholic. And he said, I've already started taking instructions. So he was done by the time we got married.
What are 3 pieces of advice you would give to a newly married couple?
Be dedicated to each other. Tell each other you love them every day of their married life. Treat them with respect, and listen to what they have to say.
Would you change anything about the way you raised your kids?
I could probably have been a little kinder at times. Because I had a little temper too, but especially when they drive me crazy. That's why I made them run around the house 10 times by their age, because I needed a little break. That's time to cool down.
And lastly, would you change anything about the way you raised your kids?
I don't think so. We didn't have a lot of money, but we stayed at home, and we made do with what we had, and We didn't have 3 cars in the garage or nothing like that. We shared 1 car. And, I think showing them the hard times that you can go through and survive, it's there. You know, you don't have to have all the money and set on top of the world financially. And I think the religion, being a Christian, is very, very important. Okay.
All right, so the last question. Any
Well-
last words or wishes for all your kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids?
Got one?
Well, I think the main thing that I think about in this day and age is they got God in their life, and I'm serious about it. So I hope and pray that all of them are going to church and take care of their families, and don't be afraid to pray for people and organizations even in the world. So.
I just drew a blank. Well, they're all married, and I think that's a big thing. We've been blessed with that. We always tell everybody we're trying to set an example that you don't agree on everything. We still don't always agree on everything. But they've all got jobs. They seem to be happy. They got good kids. Our kids turned out well, and you got to think about what's going on. And if you don't get along, don't agree with something, talk about it, get over it. Several times I went to talk to priests, and they have an unbiased opinion. They don't really tell you what to do, they just make you talk. So I hope that marriages thing stays. They stay married, now that they're all married.
Well, thank you both for letting me interview you today.
Well, thank you.
And I would just like to say you guys are amazing, and everyone is so happy and so blessed and so proud to call you grandparents, parents, or great-grandparents. So thank you again for being here today.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for doing this.